Hola, ¿qué tal? Bienvenidos todos a este último webinar de la Feria Virtual de Empleos TI. Esta semana estamos llevando a cabo la Feria Virtual de Empleos TI. Pueden revisarla en empleosti.com.mx/feria. Pueden entrar ahí y pues ver todas las empresas que están participando, todas las vacantes que tienen. Todavía va a estar hasta el domingo, entonces aprovechen para entrar y conocer todas estas empresas y vacantes. Seguramente van a encontrar algunas empresas y vacantes que les van a interesar. Los invitamos a entrar. Les recuerdo que pueden ir dejando sus preguntas en el chat a lo largo de la plática. Y también les cuento que Terminal va a estar patrocinando un par de suscripciones de 3 meses a Platzi. Entonces ahí en el chat vamos a estar dejando un link donde se pueden meter y pueden llenar un formulario. Es un requisito estar registrado en Empleos TI y pues bueno, en los próximos días van a estar contactando a los ganadores. Y pues bueno, la plática del día de hoy va a ser en inglés, entonces este, a partir de ahorita ya todo va a ser en inglés hasta el final. Y pues bueno, so I said it in Spanish. I will say it in English for those who don't speak Spanish. You can leave your questions in the chat so we can read them to Kerri at the end. And we're going to give out a couple of 3-month Platzi memberships. So we're going to leave in the chat a link so you can go there and fill a form. The only requisite is that you are registered at Empleos TI. So Kerri's talk is titled Recruiters Insight, Getting a Remote Job with US-based Companies. So this is going to be great for all of you that are looking to work remotely for companies in the US. And let me tell you a little bit about Kerri. Kerri is currently the Global Director of Talent Acquisition for Terminal and has over a decade of experience recruiting for high-growth startups across North and South America, EMEA and APAC. Prior to joining Terminal, Kerri worked for companies like Amazon, InVision, and Indeed, where she led successful recruiting teams and was responsible for internal leadership hiring. So, without further ado, Kerri, welcome and thank you for being here. The microphone is all yours.
All right. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. So as Frank mentioned today, I am going to share a little bit about getting a job with US-based companies. Some of the things that we're going to look at today are what are US companies looking for in candidates, as well as targeting and attracting the right opportunities. We'll also dig into a little bit on interviewing with US-based companies and the differences that can come with those, as well as what to expect when working for a remote company. So I just wanted to quickly give a short background on Terminal so you have an idea of a little bit of my background. So Terminal was founded and incubated at Atomic, and we launched in October 2017. We have just about 75 employees internally, but we've hired over 350 engineers to date. We have business offices in San Francisco, New York, and Austin. We are very much a remote first company and partner with clients who also a lot of times are remote first. And we are actively hiring engineers from Canada, Mexico, and Colombia. So before we kind of jump into the nitty gritty of things, I wanted to give a quick snapshot into the current remote work landscape so you can really get an idea of the possibility of finding a remote engineering role. The chances are quite high. As you can see on the left, this just shows you a breakdown of the different types of roles for 2020 that Terminal job postings had opened up to remote across at least one country. In many cases, across 3 of our markets, Canada, Mexico, and Colombia, clients are opening up roles there. Backend, you can see, tends to be the hot role that we look for when hiring remotely. but we are starting to see other roles such as front end, full stack pop up. And then the box on the right hand side just shows a little bit into, outside of Terminal, there's over 50,000 remote job postings for software engineers or technical roles. Some of the top titles we see: software engineer, senior software engineer. So, as I think a lot of people know, COVID kind of pushed us forward in the remote landscape. So, we're really going to dig into how you can work on getting one of these roles too. So, first, let's dig into what are US companies looking for when hiring remote engineers. And I really want to pull the curtain back and give you insight into the minds of recruiters so you can really get a sense of what they're looking for when it comes to engineering candidates. So, to start with the basics, everybody's pretty used to including these things and talking about, your technical skills, your work experience, and accomplishments. Um, However, there are ways that you can speak about these basics on your resume, or even in an interview or an intro call with a recruiter that can help you sound like you're not reading off of a job description to describe what you do in your role. So when you think about technical skills, um, make sure you highlight all of the relevant languages that you've worked with, not only professionally, but personally as well. If you haven't worked with a specific language or framework that they are looking for, think about what you have used that could be relevant or transferable, and prepare yourself to speak to how you'll really get up to speed to get to the level that they need with whatever tech stack you may be lacking. And then relevant work experience. A good way to tie your resume or just your experience to what the company is looking for is to take a look at the role or job description that they have posted. Look at what they have listed as far as what your responsibilities would be, what problems are you trying to solve, and use a description to really write bullets for each of your past position and highlight the areas you know you can help with. So you're still talking about your work experience, but you're just bringing in a little bit of their job description, so it really highlights how you can make an impact. And then accomplishments. Don't just focus on your day to day. Speak to your responsibilities through the success and impact you've had at the company. Um, when talking about this, recruiters really like to hear measurable data that you have to share to hear about the impact that you made on the team. In addition to some of the hard requirements, these are some soft skills that recruiters absolutely love and will more than likely start seeing more of as people continue to work remote. Working remotely definitely comes with a variety of unique challenges, and so along with doing the technical assessments and the typical interviews that you're used to, hiring managers really want to make sure that they dig into a variety of soft skills to ensure that whatever candidate they hire will thrive in the remote environment. So there are a multitude of different competencies that are critical to perfect. These four tend to come up as the most important when hiring for remote engineers. So, communication skills. Hiring managers want to know that you have both strong verbal and communication skills. And this is especially important when they're hiring remote engineers. So, one thing I always like to tell my candidates is when you're corresponding with employees from the company you're interviewing for, make sure your emails are written professionally and proofread them before sending. Recruiters and hiring managers are going to look a lot more into this when you're in a remote role because you are communicating um, in a written fashion a lot more. And then autonomy. So being able to work in a remote environment is critical. Um, from navigating complex projects without significant oversight to knowing how to ask the right questions, autonomy shows up a lot when you're in a remote job. Working from home is new for a lot of people. So being able to own projects, timelines, deliverables with minimal direction is equally important for the technical skills that you're being hired for. Be ready to share examples of not only how you've successfully worked in an environment with little direction, but think about any projects or goals that you had and you kind of were in your own little world. Those are the type of examples that recruiters love to hear about, especially if you don't have the remote work experience. And then collaboration. This is equally important working remotely or working in an office, but one of the most daunting aspects of hiring engineers for a remote team is really the idea of a full engineering team not being in the same room, working shoulder to shoulder on that project. So, proactive communication among team members is essential. Start thinking about what effective collaboration means to you and be able to speak to that in an interview. If you have a hard time figuring out what your collaboration style is, think about how you like to be communicated with and use that to develop your own sense of style. And then resourcefulness. Being resourceful as a remote team member is all about creatively and proactively really seeking out the right resources and support that you need, regardless of what the situation presents. It's important for hiring teams to not only find candidates who can work independently, but they need to know that you're not afraid to reach out if you have a problem. And then just some other additional qualities that really tend to pop out when US companies are looking for engineers. Mentorship experience. Hiring managers love to see engineers who have acted in some type of mentor position in their career. Mentorship not only highlights your leadership capabilities, but also that you are, kind of an expert in your field and are willing to take on work outside of your normal day to day to help others succeed. Even if you don't have any official experience mentoring more junior employees, try to think of any examples where you stepped in to help someone at work who was struggling, to get something done, or you helped complete a deliverable that wasn't really in your wheelhouse. And then culture exposure to the US. This is probably not as prevalent with candidates, but there are ways that you can kind of express yourself to know the US culture, even if you haven't worked directly with a company. So think about, any college internships or even groups that you've worked with, networking groups. Um, think about the exposures that you've had to the culture, and it will show that you're at least looking into the differences and are aware that there may be some challenges that come up. And finally, English proficiency. This is probably one of the most important qualities that US companies look for when they decide to hire globally. I always tell all of my candidates, when you are applying for a role or sending your resume over to a US company, make sure you send your resume in English. This will this shows the recruiter that, what are your written English skills, and it already kind of sets the stage that I am proficient in English and I can fill this role. If you're concerned about your proficiency, verbally, there are a variety of trainings, both for free and paid, that you can really look into to bring yourself up to speed. But don't ever hesitate to ask your recruiter for their feedback as well. If they have been doing this for a while, they'll be able to tell you, if they have any concerns. So speak up and don't be afraid to ask for help from them. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about targeting and attracting the right opportunities. So, how can you not only go out and search for those opportunities that you want, but how can you attract the people looking for candidates for these roles to find you or your profile? So, getting into the mindset of a recruiter is incredibly beneficial when you're looking at a new role. And I wanted to share just a little bit of insight to hopefully help you see how recruiters kind of look at when they submit candidates to positions. Recruiters like to tell the story. That is how they really focus on getting the interview. So when you are speaking to a recruiter or a hiring manager about the position, having a similar mindset can help you get farther in the interview process. Um, we want to hear your story. We love to know what you're passionate about. There is nothing that gets me more excited about a candidate than when I get on a call with them and can hear their passion or excitement for what they do come through in their answers to my questions. Your energy will travel over the phone or video a lot more than you think. And if you're excited about what you're sharing, the recruiter is much more likely to get excited about your candidacy too. Um, the next question I love to ask engineers is how they got into programming. This question really helps convey the passion for what you have, the passion you have for what you do, and also gives great insight into how you got to where you are today. Even if you feel like you don't have an exciting reason as to why, um, it's still recruiters still want to hear it. So think about your why and kind of what got you to where you are, and try to convey that when you're on the phone with them. And then we want to know what you are currently learning. This is a big one. Candidates who have an innate curiosity and are always striving to improve really, really stand out to hiring teams. They love hiring managers, love working with like minded people. And when they know that someone is always learning and seeking out ways to get better, that's usually a good sign for them that you're always striving to improve. So, when you think about what to include on your resume, it can be a little daunting. There's a lot of different information. There are a few things that recruiters look for when they're hiring remote global engineers. The first is remote work experience. Obviously, that's a huge plus if you have it. But if you have no direct remote work experience, include any responsibilities that show, how you've been successful working independently. Another great example I like to ask candidates: if your direct manager was located in a different, office or city than you, bonus points if it's a different country. But that's also a great way to express to a recruiter that you've worked in an environment with little direction, even if you were still working at an office. And then co located work experience. Um, Recruiters really do value when they see the experience that you've had working cross um, location, especially when it's outside of your own country. Now, if you don't have this type of experience, think about the teams you've worked with in other time zones. Use this as an opportunity to really show how you can acknowledge that you don't have the remote work, but you do have other examples as to how you can successfully navigate to that type of environment. And then side projects and or personal projects. This is a big one. One of the first things that I think recruiters and hiring managers tend to look for on a resume are side projects. Strong engineering leaders, again, they really want to work with like minded people who are passionate about the tools and technology that they use. So, share examples of your passion projects. And when you do, you're really demonstrating to potential hiring managers that not only you're an expert and you're working on being an expert in your field, but you have a continuous desire to really develop and build your skill set. And these are just some sample resumes that I wanted to share that that recruiters in the U.S. are used to seeing. As you can see, they're pretty basic and really focus on trying to keep it to 1 or 2 pages. A few things to point out about these resumes: the skills section on the resume A lot of times it's very helpful if you put the skills in and then put a little measuring table to kind of show your level of expertise with that skill. Um, and as you can see, keeping the bullets pretty short, 1 to 2 sentences, it really helps keep hiring managers able to look at your resume in a quick fashion and saves them time when having to go through a lot of different resumes for the many different roles they have to hire. I wanted to go into a little bit about making yourself more searchable for recruiters. Um, when recruiters are searching for candidates, they use specific keywords based on what they are looking for to really find that exact candidate that they would like to reach out to. So, first of all, include all languages and technologies that you are proficient in or especially interested in learning. If you've worked with any technology sparingly but are interested in using it more, incorporate those words into your previous job responsibilities instead of the skills section so that it still comes up on your resume, but it's not under the skills section and you're highlighting it as something you're advanced in. This is something that our recruiters like to dig into a lot with candidates. And then I articulate your ideal role. What type of problem sets do you want to solve? What parts of the technology do you like to work on the most? Think about the type of environment or frameworks that you prefer to work with. Include these details on not only your resume but also your public profile when describing your responsibilities or writing out your summary. When a recruiter receives a new rec, they will use phrases just like this to really try to pinpoint the candidates they want and limit the number of people who come up in their search. So I'll start a search string, and if distributed systems is a big thing that the client I'm working with, they want someone who's really interested in that, I'll put distributed systems in quotes and search for people who have it on their profile. So really think about the type of role you want to be in and make sure that's coming across on your resume and profile. And then insert numbers when possible. A good recruiter knows how important data is to engineers and hiring teams. And this is equally important when searching for candidates. I know that when I send over a resume to a hiring manager and it has all of these accomplishments on it that just share, any sort of number of the number of visitors they've worked with, or how many unique clicks does the company deal with on a day-to-day basis. Any measurable data you can include on your resume and profile will really help to attract recruiters looking to fill positions with similar experience. And then attend virtual events hosted by US-based companies. Most companies who host these type of events are actively hiring and partly do this to attract great candidates. So, engage in the webinars and the tech talks that you attend. And that's totally not a plug for this one, but ask questions and participate. That will get you exposure to the companies that you're attending these events for. Participate in hackathons when you can. I know it's time permitting, but this is really a great way to gain exposure to the internal team while showing off your technical skills. Terminal actually recently hosted a hackathon and received some incredible submissions. And one of our recruiters' favorite places is to go through these submissions and look at the candidate's background, and see who submitted these awesome projects, and let's see if we have a role for them. We know that they're excited about what they do. We know that they're passionate. So as I mentioned, I know they can be time consuming, but they are very, very beneficial to kind of expand your network, especially if it's hosted by a US based company. And then subscribe to company newsletters and blogs. This opens you up to insight about the company you most likely wouldn't see. And many times it will include upcoming hiring events or roles that they're looking to fill. This is also a really great way to learn more about the company and stay in the know on, what they're up to, what products they're coming out with, so that hopefully when you get an interview, you have a lot to say. You can show that you've done your research and you've paid attention to the recent activity that's been going on with them. So, after we find the role that you are looking for, or you get the message from the recruiter who has the perfect role in mind, then it's time to interview. So I wanted to go into a little bit of some of the differences that arise when companies start hiring globally. When a company decides to break out of the US and move into bringing on global teams, especially when it's remote, there's a lot of nerve that goes into that. So a lot of times the interview process may feel a little longer than normal. So it's important to be patient and remember that this very well could be new to them as well. So there may be some things that they have to work through. Be prepared to speak with multiple people from the team, especially cross functional team members. The weight of the interviewers on partner teams, such as design or product, can sometimes hold as much weight in the actual decision as the actual team's decision itself. So do your research on the background of the interviewers, see what you can find out on the company website or LinkedIn profiles about the teams that you'll be speaking to, so that you can not only share, you've researched the engineering team, but you also know a little bit about what they're doing in product or design as well. And then culture fit will likely be a large focus for almost every part of the interview process. As I mentioned, when companies start hiring globally, they can worry about new hires keeping up with their processes and way of working. So really research the company's About Us section, hiring page, and see what their mission is and their values are, and how does that kind of align with the culture that you're looking for in your next role. Expect a 12 to 15-day interview process from the time that you speak to a recruiter to the time that you hear about the decision. A lot of teams will do a debrief after the interview, which can add an extra day or two to the decision. So use this time to send a thank you note to the interviewers, highlighting a part of the conversation you enjoyed, maybe a brief sentence on why you think you'd be a good candidate for the role. Again, it can feel a little exhausting, so it's important to remember to be patient, um, and just keep in touch with the recruiter if you feel like it's been a abnormally long time. And then finally, and this is probably the biggest adjustment we see with engineers in Latin America, is getting used to the differences of tech screens when interviewing for positions with US based companies. So when hiring remote engineers, live coding exercises and virtual whiteboarding interviews tend to be part of the process. They not only help gauge a candidate's technical skills, but also their ability to collaborate in a virtual environment. This again, when companies start hiring remotely, not only the tech skills, but the soft skills are just as important. So there are going to be differences like this that are probably going to come up. If you haven't had much experience with these type of interviews, it may be worthwhile to practice on your own with a free whiteboarding tool or with a friend to just gain practice, because this is a big part of the interview process. And then some sample questions to expect. I wanted to share a few of these because as companies move into remote hiring, behavioral based interview questions that are relevant to the unique demands of remote work really tend to come up a lot when companies hire remotely. So you're going to hear questions that dig into your independent work habits, your behavior working under a tight deadline, as I mentioned before, your ability to work with little supervision. Tell me about a time is probably a question you'll hear at least once or twice. Um, Questions such as tell me about a time you had to define and lead a project with minimal direction. These are great ways for recruiters to gauge not only autonomy skills, but also, how would they work with someone not sitting next to them um, and not in an office. So when you think about these questions and how to respond to them the most effectively, the STAR format is a great way to make sure you don't miss any important information when you're sharing your answer. So if you haven't heard of the STAR method of interviewing, it really breaks down your answer into four different parts. So the first is the situation for the S. The interviewer wants you to, present the challenging situation in which you found yourself in. So start by giving them a high level overview of what the situation was. From there, you want to move into the task. So what were you required to achieve? The interviewer will want to look at what you were really trying to get out and what was the outcome of the situation. What is the goal that you are striving to reach? And then after you explain the situation and task, move on to the action. What did you do? The interviewer will be looking for information, not only what did you do, but why you did it, were there any alternatives? Don't shy away from sharing any action that wasn't ideal. Interviewers, hiring managers love to see humility. So, share any learning opportunities you had from these actions, and that can really be very beneficial to highlight when you're interviewing with the company. And then finally, results. What was the outcome of your plan? What did you achieve through your actions, and did you meet your objectives? Again, what did you learn from this experience? How have you taken these learnings and continued to use them since? Even if your results weren't what you wanted, the example that you choose to share still may be a great opportunity to show how you've really grown in your past positions and take what you learned to improve. So, just something to think about as you start interviewing and kind of preparing for these type of questions. Really focus on questions that highlight your remote work um, experience. And then what to expect when receiving an offer. One of the things we always like to point out to candidates is equity is a very, very valued part of most compensation packages put together by US companies. So it's important to, when you're receiving an offer from a US company, you need to go in having almost the same weight for the equity amount as you do for the cash part. Um, it's important to be flexible and open when considering the different components of the package. If you aren't excited about the offer, don't think that that's the end. If possible, ask for more equity instead of a higher salary. Companies usually have ranges that they really need to stick to, and asking for more equity shows that you are not only interested, in the company, but also believe in their mission and product and know that you're going to make a big impact and your equity will hopefully be worth something great. If you do feel the need to ask for more cash as part of the offer, consider asking for a sign on bonus to make up for the difference instead of more cash on the base salary. Another option is looking into negotiating on for a higher target bonus if a bonus is part of your compensation structure, or maybe additional paid vacation days. These are usually a lot easier to get approved, and it also gives you a chance to really prove yourself and hopefully, earn an increase for your performance during your next year or the company's performance review. And then I wanted to quickly just show a little bit of information that we have gathered around the skills and roles and how those impact your pay rates. So on the left, the skills listed tend to pay out at the top of the market range and usually pay, I'd say, at least 10% higher than average salaries. A combination of these skills can also drive salary up even further. And then on the right, you can see some of the most common role types that are listed in general order of highest paying to lowest paying if all other factors are held constant. Now, this visual is not really built to scale, but really show a general comparison across the different role types. And this overview is really based on Terminal's experience recruiting in multiple global markets, as well as a variety of industry benchmarks. All right, so you found the job, you interviewed, you got the offer, you accepted the offer. It was a great one. What can you expect when you start working remotely for US based companies? Remote collaboration and being a remote team member can bring a lot of differences that you're not used to. And one of them is a lot more asynchronous communication. The average user spends 90 minutes of active time on Slack per day. I'm sure that there are some of us that spend more, but that's a lot of time spent in direct communication versus productive work. So asynchronous communication really seeks to solve for the time that we spend in these type of distracted conversations. So for example, if you send a message without expecting an immediate reply, it allows the person to respond when it works for them. And this is really critical when it comes to remote team communication. So when you do async communication, make sure to include certain elements in your message when asking a question or looking for an update, including the context. So, method it should include, just a quick recap of the project or the situation, along with any other useful background information on the situation. Always set a deadline. Set a timeline for when you need to hear back. And then action needed. Be clear around what you're asking for, whether it's direction, feedback on a specific area, something pending that you need. Always make sure you're laying out the clear action um, to make sure the other person knows exactly what you're looking for. And then build intentionality around how and when you use this async communication. So different channels may serve specific needs. Some people there may be situations where an email works, or there may be a certain Slack channel that you need to use. But as a rule, it's best to keep async communication in transparent channels that anyone can see versus sending private messages. There are a variety of tools out there that offer a knowledge base where people can really track important information without having to ask repetitive questions. Or a lot of times, an internal wiki is a great idea to help centralize larger conversations. And then create ownership. Be sure there are decision makers identified, whether that's an engineering manager or a Scrum team lead, so that projects won't get stuck in limbo over ownership. This is something that I think a lot of companies struggle with, especially when they have new people who are working remotely. Make sure you know exactly who you're going to for which project so that things don't get missed. And then balance async with human connection. Leaning too much toward written communication can really isolate not only your team members, but also yourself. It's really important to make sure you still have that face to face time, whether it's one on ones, team meetings through Slack. They have donut chats where you can just get set up with random people that you work with. Um, Even if you don't have anything like that, it's important to get that FaceTime. So don't hesitate to reach out to people to get time on their calendar, and even ask how they balance if you're new to remote work. It's a great way to learn more about the company that you're working with while getting new ideas of how you can be successful. And then there are some work environment differences that come up. Um, Less structured hours is one of the differences that I think a lot of candidates aren't entirely used to when they start working for US-based companies. So, due to the time zone differences and personal work preferences, you're going to see a lot of different people starting at a different time or leaving at a different time. A lot of times, people don't have set lunch hours. So, because of the zone differences, you may have someone having lunch at 2, you may have someone having lunch at 11. So, there's a lot less structure that there is to get used to than working with Latin American companies. More creativity. This is something that we tend to see a lot of, that US companies have a lot more room for people to express their ideas and suggestions, make improvements and voice their opinion. Many of our clients we hire for don't have a lot of set processes and procedures in place yet. It's a very, very good environment to really be able to use some of those ideas that you may not have been able to share and really make an impact on the company. And then less rigid processes. In addition to a more relaxed environment, there's typically a lot less bureaucracy and more room for flexibility. And this kind of ties into the less structured work hours that we saw. It's something that it's going to be different for each individual person and frankly, each individual company. But at a high level, it is something to expect and be prepared to get used to. All right. Any questions?
Hi, Kerri. Yes, there are some questions. Remember that you can leave some questions in the comments in the chat so I can read them to Kerri. The first one is Oscar Terrazas says, what's the best way for a person that haven't had any experience working remotely to convey that they can direct themselves at work?
Great question. I would really, really focus on those soft skills that we talked about before, as well as the interview questions that I shared. When someone does not have remote work experience, the recruiter is going to focus more than ever on those soft skills because they can't ask you questions about your experience working remotely. They're going to ask you other questions related to some of the soft skills that we find in successful people who work remote. So just being able to share solid examples from those will be immensely helpful.
Great. Jose Javier Gonzalez says, can you share the resume template?
Yeah, I can get one together to share with you. The ones that I have here are not templates, but I can go back if there's any specific questions. Otherwise, I can definitely help make a template and send it over to you, Frank.
Perfect. So we can leave it in the description, maybe a link to download it. Otro día Ciudad de México says, I want to be a freelance recruiter. Which are the official pages to recruit, as well as Mexico is Indeed? I want to know if you have experience about that.
Recruit, like where we recruit in Mexico?
I think that he's saying that in Mexico is Indeed, so I want to be as well as Mexico is Indeed. I don't know if he's asking like in the US any pages to recruit.
So I can give just a quick high-level overview of some of the ways that we recruit in Mexico, if that would be helpful.
Yeah.
So we do use the typical job boards. A lot of how we also recruit is through referrals and our active pipeline. But if I think about just off the top of my head, some of the places we go, our team really likes to use GitHub a lot, as well as look for local groups to join to find more candidates that way. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, if it doesn't, let us know in the
If
chat.
it doesn't, email me.
Yes, we're going to leave if you want in the description of the video also your contact information for all of those who have more questions. We have some more in the chat. How can I know my English level and how to express that to the recruiters? Rashid Serur says.
That's a good question. I have to imagine there has to be a tool out there that can assess your English skills online. Um, but really, I think the best way that you're going to be able to gauge your level of proficiency is by talking to recruiters and just getting that experience and getting firsthand feedback from them if it is something that worries you.
Great. Jose Javier Gonzalez says, are there jobs in IT infrastructure? In my case, VMware, Nutanix, Citrix.
Yes, there are a lot of remote jobs out there. As we showed, there's over 50,000 right now. Similar to how I had mentioned using a job description to build out a resume, and we talked a little bit about those keyword searches. Another good way to find a remote job with what you're looking for is, instead of searching just by title, also include some keywords in the search that you want to see on the job description. So you just listed off a few different skills. Include one or two of those in your search, and that will pull up job descriptions that have those in them.
Great. Well, that was all the questions. Kerri, thank you very much for being here for this excellent talk and sharing all your experience. I know it will help a lot of people that are looking to work from home for US companies, even more now that this remote work boom, given the current COVID situation, is all this information is great, really.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to answer any other questions that may come up.
Great. Thank you very much. I hope to see you soon and continue collaborating together in other things for the community.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye. Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias a todos los asistentes. Esperamos que les haya servido esta plática con información muy buena ya de primera mano de alguien que recluta directamente en Estados Unidos, para todos que están buscando pues una posición remota en Estados Unidos. De verdad creo que fue muchísima información valiosa. Les recuerdo que bueno, todavía quedan algunos días de la feria de reclutamiento virtual de empleos TI, patrocinada por Newbox. Pueden entrar a empleosti.com.mx/feria y ahí pueden ver todas las empresas que están participando con todas las vacantes que tienen. Y pues seguramente van a encontrar, hay vacantes en México, Estados Unidos e inclusive en Canadá. Seguramente van a encontrar ahí vacantes a las cuales desean aplicar. Y pues bueno, recuerden también que patrocinadas por Terminal vamos a dar un par de membresías de Platzi de 3 meses. Ahí en el chat está el link por si quieren darle clic. Solo tienen que llenar un breve formulario. Tienen que ser parte de o estar registrados en Empleos TI para participar, y en los próximos días van a estarlos contactando. Bueno, van a estar contactando a los ganadores. Y pues bueno, eso sería todo. Yo les dejo un breve video de 30 segundos sobre una de las empresas ganadoras de los premios Best Places to Work for IT, que son unos premios que lanzamos este año, donde todos los candidatos que están registrados en la plataforma votaron por los lugares o por las empresas que ellos consideran que son las mejores para trabajar en TI. Y pues bueno, los dejo con el video por si quieren saber más sobre esta empresa, y pues nos vemos en la próxima. Muchísimas gracias, hasta luego.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Mi nombre es Mónica Castillo, represento a la multinacional española Factum Technologies. Año con año participamos en la Feria Virtual de Empleos TI, tenemos grandes oportunidades. Esperamos que puedas participar. Visítanos en el portal de empleos TI o bien en nuestro sitio web que es www.factum.es, o en su defecto puedes también revisar nuestra red social de LinkedIn como Factum Information Technologies. Tenemos grandes beneficios en cuanto al tema de contratación, seguro de gastos médicos mayores, seguro de vida, en fin. Participa, te esperamos. Gracias. Hola, ¿qué tal? Mi nombre es Mónica Castillo, represento a la multinacional española Factum Technologies. Año con año participamos en la Feria Virtual de Empleos TI. Tenemos grandes oportunidades, esperamos que puedas participar. Visítanos en el portal de empleos TI o bien en nuestro sitio web que es www.factum.es, o en su defecto puedes también revisar nuestra red social de LinkedIn como Factum Information Technologies. Tenemos grandes beneficios en cuanto al tema de contratación, seguro de gastos médicos mayores, seguro de vida, en fin. Participa, te esperamos. Gracias.